"You think I'm weak?" she cried. Mafia boss pulled her close, his gun still warm from the last shot. The fluorescent lights of Harborview General Hospital hummed with a sound that felt like it was scraping directly against the inside of Maya Torres's skull. It was 3 a.m, and the emergency room was a chaotic sea of misery and noise. The air smelled of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of dried blood. Maya stood at the nurse's station, her fingers pressing into the countertop until her knuckles turned white. She'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight, covering a shift for a colleague who had called in sick, and her body felt like it was made of lead. Harborview was a city that chewed people up and spat them out, and the ER was where the pieces landed. Tonight, the intake board was full. A construction worker with a crushed hand sat in chair 4, holding a bloody towel. 2 teenagers were sobbing in the corner, coming down from a bad high on whatever synthetic drug was flooding the streets this week. In Trauma Room 1, the doctors were fighting to save a man with a gunshot wound to the chest, his mother's wails penetrating the thick glass doors. Maya rubbed her eyes, trying to push away the creeping edges of a headache. She was 26 years old, but tonight she felt 50. "Nurse, I need more gauze in Trauma 2, a doctor shouted from down the hall. Maya moved before her brain even processed the command. It was muscle memory. She grabbed the supplies and rushed into the room, her movements precise and efficient. She did not panic. She did not freeze. She had learned a long time ago that freezing got you hurt. 2 years ago, Maya had been a different person. She had been quieter, softer, the kind of woman who apologized for taking up space. That was before David. Thinking of his name still caused a cold spike of adrenaline to shoot through her chest. The relationship had started like a fairy tale and ended with a broken arm and a restraining order that he had violated twice. He had made her feel small. He had made her feel weak. He had told her she was nothing without him so many times that she had almost believed it. Almost. She handed the gauze to the doctor, her hand steady. She was not that girl anymore. She had rebuilt herself, brick by painful brick. She worked double shifts. She took self-defense classes that left her bruised and exhausted. She kept her apartment locked with 3 deadbolts. She was surviving, but she was not living. By the time her shift ended, the sun was threatening to rise, painting the gritty skyline of Harborview in shades of bruised purple and gray. Maya changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, her movements slow and stiff. She just wanted to go home, crawl into her bed, and sleep for 12 hours. "You are not going home," a voice announced from the doorway. Maya looked up to see Jenna Collins leaning against the frame, looking annoyingly fresh despite having worked the same shift. Jenna was everything Maya was not currently. Vibrant, loud, and full of reckless energy. "I am dead on my feet." "Jen," Maya said, shoving her sneakers into her bag, "I have 0 energy for your schemes." Jenna pushed off the doorframe and blocked Maya's exit. "It is Friday night. Well, technically Saturday morning, but the night is still alive, and you have not been out in 3 months. You are becoming a ghost." Maya, a very boring, hard-working ghost. "I like being a ghost," Maya muttered. "Ghosts do not have to wear high heels. We are going to Club Knot," Jenna declared, ignoring her. Maya froze. Club Knot was the most exclusive spot in the city. It was where the politicians, the celebrities, and the people with too much money and not enough morals went to burn off steam. It was also expensive. "I cannot afford a cover charge that costs more than my weekly grocery bill," Maya argued. Jenna grinned, waving a sleek black card. "My cousin is a promoter. We get in for free, and we skip the line. Come on, Maya, just 1 hour. Put on that red dress you bought and never wore. Show the world you are still alive." Maya hesitated. The safe, quiet solitude of her apartment called to her. But so did the reflection in the locker mirror, a woman with dark circles under her eyes who looked like she was fading away. Maybe Jenna was right. Maybe she needed to remember what it felt like to be a person, not just a machine that fixed other people. Fine, Maya sighed, knowing she would regret it. 1 hour. 40 minutes later, Maya stepped out of a cab and looked up at the neon sign of Club Naughty. The bass from inside thumped against the pavement, vibrating through the soles of her shoes. She felt ridiculous in the red dress. It was silk, slipping over her curves like water, with a neckline that plunged lower than she was comfortable with and a slit up the thigh that felt dangerous. Jenna, dressed in shimmering silver, linked her arm through Maya's and dragged her past the velvet rope. The bouncer, a mountain of a man with a headset, looked at the black card Jenna flashed and nodded. He unclipped the rope, and they stepped into the dark, pulsing heart of the club, inside. The air was hot and smelled of expensive perfume, sweat, and ozone. The music was deafening, a rhythmic pounding that made thought impossible. Lights flashed in chaotic bursts, blue, crimson, gold, illuminating the sweating crowd on the dance floor. Maya felt a momentary wave of panic, the urge to flee rising in her throat. Too many people, too much noise, no exits visible. She forced herself to breathe. In for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. She was safe. She was with Jenna. They made their way to the bar, which was a glowing slab of frosted glass. Jenna ordered 2 martinis that cost more than $30 each, laughing as she shouted over the music. Maya took a sip of her drink, the alcohol burning a path down her throat, grounding her. She turned, leaning her back against the bar, and scanned the room. It was a habit she could not break. Check the exits. Check the threats. Her gaze drifted up to the VIP balcony that overlooked the dance floor. It was separated by a glass railing, a world above the chaos. Seated in a semicircular leather booth was a group of men who looked like they did not belong in a nightclub. They were not dancing. They were not smiling. They were watching. In the center of the group sat a man who arrested her attention completely. He was wearing a tailored black suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a stark contrast to the flashy, unbuttoned shirts of the other patrons. His dark hair was swept back, and even from this distance, Maya could see the sharp, predatory lines of his face. He sat with a stillness that was unnerving, one hand resting casually on the rim of a crystal tumbler. He was not looking at the women dancing on the tables. He was not looking at his phone. He was looking right at her. Maya felt a jolt, as if she had touched a live wire. His gaze was heavy, physical. It was not the leering look she often got from men at bars. It was cold, calculating, and intensely curious. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom, and for some reason, he had paused on her. "Who is that?" Maya shouted to Jenna, nudging her and nodding toward the balcony. Jenna squinted, following her gaze. "Oh, wow," Jenna mouthed. "That is the owner. I think his name is Luca. My cousin said he owns half the real estate in Harborview. Super private, super rich." Maya looked back. Luca was still watching her. He did not look away when he caught her staring. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. A shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning traced down Maya's spine. There was a dangerous gravity to him, a pull she could not explain. He looked like the kind of trouble her mother had warned her about, the kind of trouble that did not break your heart but stopped it completely. Suddenly, the man to Luca's right leaned in and whispered something urgent into his ear. The stillness broke. Luca's expression hardened into something sharper, colder. He stood up abruptly, buttoning his jacket with a smooth, controlled motion. Then, the world exploded. The sound was distinct. It was not the bass drop of a song. It was the sharp, cracking report of automatic gunfire. Pop, 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 pop. Glass shattered above the bar. A woman near the entrance screamed, a high, tearing sound that cut through the music. The music cut out instantly, leaving a void filled only by the echoes of shots and the rising tide of panic. "Get down!" someone roared. The crowd surged like a terrified animal. People were shoving, trampling, scrambling over each other to get away from the main entrance. The front doors had burst open, and men in ski masks were pouring in, their weapons flashing under the strobe lights that continued to blink in manic indifference. Maya grabbed Jenna, pulling her down behind the solid structure of the bar. "Stay down!" Maya yelled, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Glass rained down on them as bottles behind the bar exploded. The smell of high-proof alcohol filled the air, mixing with the acrid scent of gunpowder. Through the gap between the bar stools, Maya looked up toward the VIP balcony. The attackers were not shooting at the crowd. They were firing upward, targeting the booth where Luca had been sitting. It was an assassination attempt. Luca's men had flipped the heavy table for cover and were returning fire. The noise was deafening. A war zone in a disco. Maya saw Luca moving, not retreating to the safety of the back exit like a sane person. He was grabbing one of his bodyguards by the vest, hauling the man behind a concrete pillar just as bullets chewed up the upholstery where the man had been standing. He saved him, Maya thought. A split second of shock piercing her fear. Then she saw the hit. A second wave of attackers had appeared on the upper gantry, flanking the VIP section. A gunman leaned over the railing and fired. Luca jerked violently, his body spinning from the impact. He slammed into the glass railing, clutching his left shoulder, blood instantly dark against his pristine suit. He went down on one knee, his gun slipping from his hand as he gripped the wound. Jenna was sobbing into the floor, her hands over her head. "We are going to die. Maya, we are going to die." Maya looked at the exit. It was blocked by the crush of panicked bodies. Then she looked at the VIP stairs, which were only 20 feet away. Luca was bleeding out. He was trying to stand, trying to reach his weapon, but his movement was sluggish. The color was draining from his face, even under the shifting lights. The nurse in Maya took over. The part of her that had spent the last 4 years holding pressure on gunshot wounds and stitching up knife slashes did not care about mafia politics or danger. It only cared that a human being was bleeding to death in front of her. "Stay here," Maya ordered Jenna. "Maya, no!" Jenna screamed, grabbing at her ankle. Maya kicked free and stayed low, crawling on her hands and knees through the debris. Broken glass sliced into her palms and knees, ruining the red dress and drawing blood. But she did not stop. She moved like a soldier, keeping her profile low, timing her movements between the bursts of fire. She reached the stairs and scrambled up them, keeping her head down. The air up here was thick with smoke and dust. She found Luca slumped against the concrete pillar, his face gray, his teeth gritted in agony. 2 of his men were firing back at the attackers, too occupied to notice her approach. Maya slid across the floor, coming to a stop beside him. Luca flinched, his right hand going for a backup weapon at his ankle, but he froze when he saw her. His eyes, dark and dilated with pain, widened in genuine shock. "What are you doing?" he rasped, his voice strained. "Get out of here! Shut up and let me see!" Maya snapped. She did not ask for permission. She grabbed his lapel and ripped the expensive fabric of his shirt open. The bullet had torn through the deltoid, missing the bone but nicking something vital. The blood was bright red and pulsing, arterial or close to it. He was losing volume fast. "I need a tourniquet," she muttered. She looked around. Nothing. She reached for the silk tie of the bodyguard crouching next to them. "Give me your tie," she commanded. The bodyguard, a massive man with a scar running through his eyebrow, looked at her like she was insane. "Who the hell are you? Give me the damn tie or your boss bleeds out in 2 minutes," Maya yelled, her voice cutting through the noise of the gunfight. The man blinked, then ripped the tie from his neck and handed it to her. Maya worked fast. She looped the tie high up on Luca's arm, near the armpit. Above the wound, she pulled it tight, using a metal serving spoon from a fallen tray to twist it, creating a windlass to cut off the blood flow. "This is going to hurt," she warned. Luca looked at her. He did not look at the wound. He looked directly into her eyes. "Do it." She twisted the spoon. Luca let out a sharp, guttural groan, his head falling back against the pillar, sweat breaking out instantly on his forehead, but he did not pull away. The bright spurts of blood slowed to a trickle. "Keep pressure here," Maya ordered the bodyguard, guiding his hand to the wound. "Do not let go." The gunfire abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. Sirens. The sound of police sirens wailed in the distance. Getting louder by the second, the attackers, realizing their window had closed, were retreating. Maya could hear their heavy boots pounding on the metal catwalks as they fled. "We have to move." "Boss," the bodyguard said, his voice urgent, "the cops are 2 minutes out. We cannot be here when they sweep the place." Luca nodded, grimacing as he tried to stand. He wavered, his balance gone from the blood loss. Maya instinctively stepped in, wrapping her arm around his waist to steady him. He was heavy, solid muscle and dead weight. He looked down at her. His face was inches from hers. She could smell gunpowder and the metallic scent of his blood, but underneath that, the scent of sandalwood and rain. "You," Luca said. His voice was weak but commanded absolute authority. "You are coming with us." "What?" Maya pulled back, but his good hand shot out and gripped her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "No, I have to find my friend. I have to go back to the hospital." "Enzo, get her friend out safely," Luca said to the bodyguard, never breaking eye contact with Maya. "Bring the girl." "You cannot kidnap me," Maya protested, panic finally piercing her professional calm. "I just saved your life. That is why you are coming," Luca said, his eyes narrowing. "And because the men who did this just saw you save me. You are a witness now. You are involved. If I leave you here, they will find you before the police finish their report." Maya opened her mouth to argue, but Enzo was already moving. He spoke into his earpiece, and 2 more men appeared from the shadows. Before she could scream, she was being hustled down a back service stairwell, sandwiched between the large men, with Luca stumbling beside her. They burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway. A black armored SUV screeched to a halt in front of them. The side door slid open. "Get in!" Enzo barked. Maya was shoved into the back seat. Luca was pushed in beside her. The doors locked with a heavy, mechanical thud that sounded like a prison cell closing. The SUV peeled out of the alley, tires shrieking, merging into the traffic just as the first police cruisers rounded the corner with lights flashing. Maya pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the man beside her. Luca was leaning his head back against the leather seat, eyes closed, his face pale. His hand was still gripping his arm where she had applied the tourniquet. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she was starting to dread the answer. "Enzo," sitting in the front passenger seat, turned around. He looked at Luca with a mixture of worry and deference. "Call Dr. Thorne. Tell him the boss has taken a hit. Tell him the Moretti family is coming in hot." The name hit Maya like a physical blow. Moretti. Every person who had lived in Harborview for more than a month knew that name. They were not just a gang. They were an institution. They ran the unions. They ran the shipping yards. They ran the city. And they were dangerous. Maya looked at Luca with wide, terrified eyes. She had just saved the life of the Don of the Moretti crime family. Luca opened his eyes. He looked at her, seeing the dawn of realization on her face. He saw the fear, the sudden stiffening of her posture. "Thank you," he said softly. The words were polite, but the tone was heavy. He looked down at her hands, which were resting on her lap. They were stained with his blood. He reached out with his uninjured hand and brushed his knuckles lightly against her trembling fingers. It was a ghost of a touch, but it burned. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "You just kidnapped me," Maya shot back, her voice trembling but defiant. "I am keeping you alive," Luca corrected. The SUV swerved through the city streets, avoiding the main avenues, taking a winding route toward the hills where the money lived. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a sleek, modern building tucked away behind high walls and wrought iron gates. It looked like a spa or a retreat, but Maya noticed the cameras on every corner and the armed guards patrolling the perimeter. They pulled into an underground garage. A medical team was waiting as soon as the doors opened. They swarmed the car, pulling Luca out onto a gurney. Maya stepped out, shivering in the cool air. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaking and cold. She hugged her arms around herself, conscious of the blood drying on her skin and the ruin of her dress. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped forward. He was older than Luca, with silver hair and eyes like flint. This was Marco De Luca, the consigliere. Maya recognized him from newspaper photos she had seen regarding city council corruption trials where the evidence always mysteriously vanished. "Who is she?" Marco asked, looking at Maya as if she were a stain on the floor. She patched him up, Enzo said. Saved his arm, maybe his life. Boss said to bring her. Marco walked up to Maya. He invaded her personal space, looming over her. You are a nurse? Maya lifted her chin. She refused to be intimidated, even though her knees felt like water. Yes, and I am leaving. I need to call my friend. I need to go home. No, Marco said simply. Excuse me? Maya stepped forward, anger flaring hot enough to burn through the fear. You cannot keep me here. That is kidnapping. Marco looked at her with pity, which was worse than the aggression. Miss Torres, he said, and the fact that he already knew her name made her blood run cold. The men who hit the club tonight were Rojas Syndicate. They do not leave loose ends. They saw you help Luca. They saw your face. If you walk out of here tonight, you will be dead by sunrise. Maya stared at him. She wanted to scream that this was insane, that this was a movie plot, not her life. She wanted to wake up in her bed and realize it was just a nightmare brought on by exhaustion. But the blood on her hands was sticky and real. The smell of the gun smoke still clung to her hair. You are under the protection of the Moretti family now, Marco said, turning to walk away. Whether you like it or not. Maya stood alone in the concrete garage, the echo of his words bouncing off the walls. She looked at the elevator where they had taken Luca. She realized with a sinking feeling that the brutal shift at the hospital had been the easy part of her night. Her life, the quiet, safe, invisible life she had built so carefully, was gone, and in its place was a world of guns, blood, and a man with eyes that saw too much. She was trapped. But as she clenched her blood-stained fists, Maya Torres made a silent vow. She might be trapped, but she would not be a victim, not again. The morning sun that filtered through the blinds of Maya Torres's apartment felt intrusive, a stark, blinding white that offered no comfort. Maya dropped her keys into the small ceramic bowl by the door, the sound echoing too loudly in the sudden silence. She had been awake for nearly 24 hours, yet her mind was racing at a fever pitch, replaying the chaotic scenes from Club Naughty in a loop that refused to fade. The smell of copper and gunpowder seemed to be stuck in her nostrils, overpowering the scent of her lavender air freshener. She bent down to untie her shoes, her body aching as if she had run a marathon, and that was when she saw it. A small, rectangular card lay on the floor, just inside the threshold of her door. It had been slid underneath while she was gone. Maya froze, her heart skipping a beat before hammering against her ribs. She reached down slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked it up. It was a standard business card, thick stock, embossed with the seal of the Harborview Police Department, Detective Rachel Kane, Homicide and Organized Crime Division. On the back, a message was scrawled in blue ink. We know you were there. Call me before they find you. Maya stared at the card, her breath catching in her throat. She was officially on the radar. The police knew. And if the police knew she had been close enough to help Luca Moretti, then the people who had tried to kill him certainly knew too. She locked her door, throwing all 3 deadbolts, but for the first time in years, the heavy click of the locks did not make her feel safe. It felt like she was locking herself inside a trap. The next 2 days passed in a blur of anxiety. Maya tried to maintain her routine, telling herself that normalcy was her best defense. She went to the grocery store, she did her laundry, she went to work. But the city had changed. Every shadow looked deeper. Every car that slowed down near her sent a spike of adrenaline through her veins. At Harborview General, the atmosphere was usually frantic enough to drown out personal worries. But tonight, Maya felt exposed. As she charted vitals for a patient in bed 6, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. Through the glass doors of the ER waiting room, she saw 2 men standing near the vending machines. They were not wearing hospital wristbands. They were not comforting sick relatives. They were wearing heavy leather jackets despite the humid weather, and they were watching the nurses' station. Maya lowered her head, focusing on her tablet, her fingers gripping the stylus so hard it almost snapped. You are being paranoid, she told herself. This is an ER. Weird people are everywhere. But then Jenna sidled up to her, her face pale and devoid of her usual bubbly energy. Jenna pretended to check a supply cart, leaning in close to Maya's ear. "Maya, do not look now," Jenna whispered, her voice shaking. "But there is a guy in a gray hoodie by the ambulance bay. I saw him in the parking lot when I drove in. He watched you walk all the way to the entrance." A cold chill washed over Maya, turning her blood to ice water. It was not paranoia. It was happening. "I am going to call security," Jenna hissed. "No," Maya said sharply, grabbing Jenna's wrist. "If we make a scene, and they are who I think they are, they might do something right here. There are families here. Jen, kids." She swallowed the lump of terror in her throat. "I will finish my shift," Maya said, forcing her voice to sound steady. "Then I will go straight to my car. I will drive to the precinct and show Detective Kane the card." The rest of the shift was torture. Every time the automatic doors slid open, Maya flinched. When she finally clocked out at midnight, the hospital was quiet, settling into the eerie lull that happened before the late-night rush of bar fights and accidents. Maya walked to the parking garage alone. She kept her keys woven between her fingers, a pathetic weapon against professional killers. But it was all she had. The garage was dimly lit, half the fluorescent tubes flickering or burnt out, casting long, dancing shadows against the concrete walls. Her footsteps echoed loudly, a rhythmic clack, clack, clack that seemed to announce her presence to the entire world. She reached her Honda Civic, her hand shaking as she reached for the door handle. "Excuse me, Miss Torres." The voice came from behind a concrete pillar, smooth and terrifyingly polite. Maya spun around, dropping her bag. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was young, with a cruel, handsome face and a neck tattoo that crept up behind his ear, a scorpion, the symbol of the Rojas foot soldiers. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are a hard woman to get alone," he said, taking a step toward her. "Stay back," Maya shouted, backing up until her hips hit the side of her car. "I just want to talk," the man said, pulling a cigarette from his pocket and lighting it with slow, deliberate movements. "About the other night, you were very brave, helping a man like Moretti." "I do not know what you're talking about," Maya lied, her voice trembling. The man chuckled, exhaling a plume of smoke. "We know where you live." "Maya, apartment 4B. We know you take the bus when your car breaks down. We know you like to run in the park on Sundays." He took another step. The space between them shrank, suffocating her. "My boss, Mr. Rojas, he's very curious. He wants to know what Moretti told you. What did you see? What did you hear? If you tell me, maybe we can forget you were ever involved." He reached out, his hand moving toward her shoulder. "Get away from me," Maya screamed, slapping his hand away. The man's face darkened instantly. The polite mask vanished. He lunged, grabbing her arm with a grip like iron. "You stupid bit." A deafening roar filled the garage. Tires screeched against concrete, the sound tearing through the air like a scream. A massive black SUV drifted around the corner, its headlights blindingly bright. Sweeping over them, the car didn't stop. It accelerated, heading straight for the Rojas thug. The man released Maya and dove to the side, rolling over the hood of a parked sedan to avoid being crushed. The SUV slammed on its brakes, skidding to a halt just inches from Maya's legs. The doors flew open before the vehicle had even fully settled. Enzo stepped out from the driver's side, a large, suppressed pistol already raised in his hand. He did not yell. He simply aimed. The Rojas thug scrambled to his feet, took one look at Enzo and the gun, and sprinted toward the stairwell, disappearing into the darkness like a rat scuttling into a sewer. Enzo did not pursue. He held his position, scanning the shadows. While the rear door of the SUV opened, Luca Moretti stepped out. He looked different than he had at the club. He was wearing a dark navy button-down shirt, his left arm immobilized in a sleek black sling. His face was pale, lines of pain etched around his eyes and mouth, but his presence was just as commanding. He looked at Maya, his gaze sweeping over her to check for injuries. "Get in the car," Luca said. His voice was rough, tired. Maya stared at him, her chest heaving as the adrenaline turned into fury. She felt hot tears pricking her eyes. not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated anger. "Are you insane?" she shouted, pushing off her car and storming toward him. "You almost ran me over." "I saved you," Luca replied calmly, though his jaw was tight. Again. "You brought this on me," Maya yelled, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. "That man knew where I lived. He knew my apartment number. Because of you. Because I helped you." "I know," Luca said. "That is why you are coming with us. Now. Before he comes back with 3 friends." "I am not going anywhere with you," Maya cried. "I am going to the police." Enzo lowered his gun slightly, looking at Luca. "Boss, we are exposed here." Luca stepped closer to Maya. He did not touch her, but he invaded her space, forcing her to look up at him. "The police cannot help you tonight." "Maya, that man who just ran away? He will call his crew. They will be at your apartment before you can even file a report." "Detective Kane is good, but she cannot watch your door 24 hours a day." I do not want your protection," Maya argued, though the conviction in her voice was cracking. "I want my life back." "That life is gone," Luca said. The brutality of the statement hit her harder than a slap. "It is gone until this is finished. You can stand here and scream at me, and I will let you. But do it in the car where you are bulletproof. Please." The word hung in the air. "Please." It was a stark contrast to his orders. Maya looked at his eyes and saw desperation there, buried deep under the layers of ice. He was terrified for her. She looked at the dark stairwell where the thug had vanished. She looked at her small, vulnerable car. Then she looked at the armored beast of an SUV. "Fine," she whispered, defeat slumping her shoulders. The drive was silent. They did not go to the clinic this time. They drove toward the skyline, to the penthouse level of the city. The car pulled into a private underground entrance beneath Il Rifugio, one of the most expensive Italian restaurants in the city. Maya knew it. She had never been able to afford to eat there. They took a private elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Maya expected a bachelor pad or a command center. What she saw confused her. The penthouse was beautiful. It was warm, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, soft leather furniture and abstract art that looked genuine. There were framed photos on the mantel, an older couple, a young Luca smiling with a soccer ball, a teenage girl who looked like him. It was a home. But then she saw the reality underneath. The windows were too thick. Bulletproof glass. There was a keypad on the interior of the front door. 2 men with earpieces stood silently in the hallway. It was a golden cage. "This is where you live?" Maya asked, stepping onto the hardwood floor. "Yes," Luca said, waiting as Enzo locked the elevator down. "You will be safe here. No one gets in without my permission." Maya walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. She felt a profound sense of isolation. "And no one gets out?" she asked quietly. Luca did not answer immediately. He walked to the kitchen island and poured a glass of water, his movements stiff due to his injury. "You are not a prisoner, Maya. But outside that door, there is a target on your back. Inside here, you are a guest." For the next 3 days, the penthouse became a pressure cooker. Maya refused to be a passive guest. She wore her worn-out jeans and oversized t-shirts, stalking around the refined space like a tiger pacing a cell. She refused the clothes Luca offered to have bought for her. She refused to sit and watch TV. Luca was a constant, silent presence. He spent his days in the study, taking calls, speaking in low, rapid Italian, managing an empire that was under siege, but he always emerged for meals, sitting opposite her at the long dining table. The tension between them was a physical weight. It was not just fear. It was a strange, vibrating awareness. Maya would catch him watching her over the rim of his espresso cup, his eyes tracing the line of her throat. She would find herself staring at his hands, strong, scarred hands, and wondering how many people they had hurt, and yet remembering how gentle he had been when he touched her hand in the car. It came to a head on Thursday night. Maya was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables for a stew she had insisted on making because she couldn't stand the fancy takeout anymore. Luca walked in, looking exhausted. He had discarded his sling, though he still moved his left arm carefully. "You do not have to cook," he said, leaning against the counter. "We have staff. I need to do something with my hands." "Luca," Maya snapped, not looking up, "or I am going to strangle you." Luca let out a short, dry laugh. "You would have to get in line." "Do not joke about it," Maya said, slamming the knife down. "It is not funny. People are dying. That man in the garage, he was going to hurt me. Because of you. Because of your wars over—" "What? Money, territory, pride? It is more complicated than that," Luca said, his voice hardening. "Is it?" Maya turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "You wear these nice suits, and you live in this beautiful apartment with pictures of your family, pretending you are civilized, but you are just a coward hiding behind guns. You pay other men to bleed for you. You drag innocent people into your mess because you cannot handle your own problems without violence." The air in the kitchen went still. Maya realized she had gone too far. She had called a Mafia boss a coward to his face. Luca pushed off the counter. He moved fast, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. Maya backed up until her lower back hit the edge of the island. Luca stopped inches from her. He was radiating heat and anger. His eyes were dark pools of storm clouds. "You think I hide?" he asked, his voice a low growl. "You think I enjoy this? I was shot 3 days ago standing in front of my men. I took that bullet so Enzo could get to cover. I do what I do and to keep the wolves away from the people I love. You are the wolf." "Luca," Maya shot back, breathless, her heart hammering against his chest. "I am the necessary monster," he corrected, leaning down so his face was level with hers. "And right now, I am the only thing standing between you and a grave." They stared at each other, breathing hard. The anger was there, sharp and biting, but underneath it was something else, a magnetic pull that twisted in Maya's gut. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She could see the pore of his skin, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. Suddenly, the lights died. The penthouse plunged into absolute darkness. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The city lights outside seemed to vanish as the heavy security shutters slammed down automatically with a mechanical clang. Maya gasped, instinctively reaching out. Her hands landed on Luca's chest. "Stay still," Luca ordered, his voice instantly shifting from angry to commanding. "What is happening?" Maya whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Rojas," Luca murmured. "They are testing the grid, trying to see how long the backup generators take to kick in." The room was pitch black, save for a sliver of moonlight filtering through a crack in the shutters. Maya felt exposed, blind. The fear of the garage returned, the feeling of hands reaching for her in the dark. She shivered violently. Luca sensed it. In the darkness, he moved. She felt the weight of his suit jacket settling over her shoulders, warm from his body heat. He wrapped it around her, his hands lingering on her upper arms. "I have you," he said softly, his voice right by her ear. "You are safe." The sudden intimacy was disarming. Moments ago they had been screaming. Now, he was her only anchor in the dark. Maya turned her head, trying to see him. Her nose brushed against the fabric of his shirt. "Luca?" she breathed. "I am here." He was so close. She could feel the heat radiating from him. The scent of sandalwood and rain encompassed her. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a terrifying, overwhelming need for connection. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of being alone. His hand moved up, his palm rough and warm, cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone, a tender, reverent touch that made her knees weak. "Maya," he whispered. It sounded like a question and a plea all at once. She didn't answer with words. She reached up, gripping the lapels of his shirt, and pulled him down. The kiss was not like in the movies. It was hesitant at first, a testing of boundaries, lips brushing against lips in the dark. But then, something snapped. The tension that had been building for days, the fear, the anger, the proximity, exploded. Luca groaned low in his throat and deepened the kiss. His good hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back, taking control. His mouth was hot and demanding, tasting of coffee and desperation. Maya met him with equal force, her hands sliding up his chest, around his neck, pulling him closer until there was no air between them. It was a clash of desperation. It was a release of years of loneliness. Maya felt alive in a way she hadn't since before David, maybe since before she became a nurse. She felt the steady, powerful thud of Luca's heart against her own. She felt the strength in his body, the dangerous power he held in check, now focused entirely on her. He pressed her back against the island, his body pinning hers, making her feel small and protected and cherished all at once. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. The Rojas Syndicate didn't exist. There was only the heat of his mouth, the roughness of his hands, and the fire in her blood. Then, the lights flickered back on. The blinding fluorescent glare flooded the kitchen. The hum of the appliances returned. They broke apart as if physically struck. Maya stumbled back, her chest heaving, her lips swollen and tingling. She looked at Luca. He looked wrecked. His hair was messed up from her hands, his eyes wide and dark, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Maya brought a hand up to her mouth, touching her lips. The reality of what she had just done crashed down on her. She had just kissed Luca Moretti. She had just kissed the man who had brought violence to her doorstep. Maya stammered, stepping away, shaking her head. I cannot... She turned and ran. She ran out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and into the guest room she had been using. She slammed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. She buried her face in her hands, her heart racing so fast she thought it might explode. She could still taste him. And God help her. She wanted to do it again. But she knew, with a terrifying clarity, that kissing Luca Moretti was the most dangerous thing she had ever done. More dangerous than the bullets. More dangerous than the Rojas thugs, because bullets could only kill her body. Loving a man like him could destroy her soul. Maya woke with a start, the morning light filtering through the heavy curtains of the guest room. For a disorienting second, she reached for the alarm clock that usually sat on her bedside table in her cramped apartment, only to close her hand around empty air. The high thread count of the sheets and the silence of the penthouse brought the reality crashing back. She was not home. She was in a gilded cage above the city. But it was not the fear of the Rojas Syndicate that made her heart race as she sat up. It was the memory of the night before. She touched her lips. They felt swollen, sensitive. The memory of Luca's mouth on hers was not fading like a dream. It was branded there, hot and confusing. She had kissed him. She, Maya Torres, who spent her life fixing the damage men like him caused, had pulled a Mafia boss down and kissed him until the world went dark. Guilt pooled in her stomach, heavy and cold. How could she crave the touch of a man whose hands were stained with so much blood? Yet even as the guilt gnawed at her, a treacherous part of her mind replayed the way he had looked at her, like she was the only source of light in a blackout. She pushed the covers aside, needing water, needing to scrub the confusion from her mind. As she walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, the low murmur of voices stopped her. The door to Luca's study was ajar. It is getting worse. Marco. Luca's voice was low, vibrating with a suppressed rage that made the hair on Maya's arm stand up. They hit a delivery truck this morning. Not one of ours. A legitimate vendor. The driver is in the ICU. They are sending a message, Marco replied, his tone flat and pragmatic. Diego Rojas does not care about collateral damage. He wants to starve your operations. If the vendors are too scared to deliver to your restaurants or your warehouses, the money dries up. When the money dries up, the loyalty wavers. He's targeting civilians. Luca snapped. The sound of glass shattering against a wall followed, making Maya jump. He knows I cannot retaliate in kind. He knows I will not target his family's legitimate fronts because, unlike him, I am not a butcher. Maya leaned against the wall, hugging her arms around herself. It was not just a gang war anymore. It was bleeding out into the city, infecting innocent lives, just like the virus of violence always did. And Luca, for all his power, sounded cornered. Later that afternoon, the reality of her confinement pressed in on her. Maya stood by the window in the living room, peering through the slats of the blinds. Down on the street, life went on. Taxis honked, people rushed to lunch, and the world turned without her. Then she saw a familiar figure. Stepping out of a sedan parked in the loading zone of Il Refugio was a woman with a sharp bob cut and a trench coat. Detective Rachel Kane. Maya's breath hitched. Kane was walking right into the restaurant downstairs. "She's looking for you." Maya spun around. Luca was standing in the archway of the living room. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. He was wearing a casual sweater that softened his sharp edges, but his posture was rigid. "I should go down there," Maya said, pointing at the window. "She is a detective. Luca, if I tell her I am here willingly. If you tell her you are here willingly, you become an accomplice in her eyes." Luca interrupted, walking into the room, and worse. "You confirm to Rojas that you are a valuable asset to me. The police station is leaky. Maya, if Kane puts your statement on file, a dirty cop on Rojas's payroll will read it within the hour. They will know exactly where you are." "So I just hide?" Maya demanded, frustration bubbling over. "I watch you pace around while innocent truck drivers get put in the ICU? I am useless here. Luca, I am a nurse. I'm supposed to be helping people, not hiding in a tower while the city burns." Luca stopped in front of her. He looked down, his expression conflicted. "I am keeping you alive. That is not enough," Maya shouted. "It is not enough for me to just breathe and eat your food. I need a purpose. If I am going to be stuck in this fortress, I need to do something." Luca studied her face, searching for a crack in her resolve. He found none. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. Maya took a deep breath. "I saw your men. The one standing guard in the hall? One of them has a cut on his hand that looks infected. Another is limping. They do not go to the hospital, do they?" Luca shook his head. "Not unless it is life-threatening. Questions are dangerous. Then let me treat them," Maya said. "Set me up a space, a room. Get me supplies, antibiotics, sutures, sterile fields. I can handle the minor injuries. I can make sure your men do not die from stupid infections because they are too afraid to go to the ER." Luca stared at her for a long moment. A slow, reluctant admiration dawned in his eyes. "You want to run a field hospital in my penthouse?" "I want to be a nurse," Maya corrected. "Even here, especially here." The next day, the guest room at the end of the hall was transformed. Enzo brought in crates of medical supplies that Maya had listed, high-grade items that must have cost a fortune on the black market. Maya set up a sterile station on a stainless steel table, organizing instruments with military precision. At first, the men were hesitant. They were used to back-alley doctors who smelled of gin and asked for cash up front. They looked at Maya with suspicion, this civilian woman who had somehow captured the boss's attention. But pain is a great equalizer. The first patient was a hulking guard named Silvio, who had a jagged slice on his forearm from a broken bottle during a scuffle. He sat on the edge of the examination table, looking like a nervous schoolboy. "This is going to sting." "Silvio," Maya said, her voice calm and professional as she prepped the needle. "Do not faint on me. I cannot carry you." Silvio snorted, but he flinched when the needle went in. Maya worked quickly, her hands steady. As she stitched, she talked, not about the war or the guns, but about normal things. "You have kids?" "Silvio?" she asked. "2. The big man grunted. "Girls, 6 and 8. They like school?" "The oldest does. The little one, she just wants to dance." "Ballet. It costs a fortune for the lessons." Maya tied off the suture and snipped the thread. "Keep this dry for 3 days and tell your little girl to keep dancing." By the end of the week, the dynamic in the penthouse had shifted. The men stopped looking at her as a liability and started looking at her with respect. She reset a dislocated finger for a driver who thanked her profusely. She treated a nasty burn on the cook's hand. She scolded Enzo for skipping a dose of antibiotics she had prescribed for a sinus infection. Through these small interactions, the faceless soldiers of the Moretti family became human to her. They were fathers worried about tuition. They were husbands buying anniversary gifts. They were men who had grown up in neighborhoods where the only options were the factory or the family. and the factories had closed 20 years ago. Maya's black and white view of the world began to gray. They were criminals, yes, but they were also people trying to survive in a broken system, rallying around Luca because he offered them protection and loyalty in a city that offered neither. Then came the night the war came to the doorstep. It was 2 a.m. when the elevator override buzzed, a harsh, urgent sound that woke Maya instantly. She threw on a robe and ran into the hallway just as the elevator doors slid open. Enzo and another guard were dragging a young man between them. It was Leo, one of the youngest enforcers. He couldn't have been more than 22. His shirt was soaked in blood, his face a mask of gray agony. "Table now," Maya shouted, her sleepiness vanishing instantly. They hauled him into her makeshift clinic and hoisted him onto the table. Leo was groaning, a terrible, wet sound. "Ambush," Enzo panted, his hands shaking. "They were waiting for us at the docks." He took 2 in the leg, 1 in the side. "Get the scissors," Maya commanded. Ripping open Leo's shirt, the wound in the side was bad. It had missed the lung but nicked something vascular. Blood was welling up fast, dark and ominous. "I need light," Maya yelled. "The overheads are not enough." A beam of bright, focused light suddenly illuminated the wound. Maya looked up to see Luca standing there. He had a tactical flashlight in one hand and a terrifying intensity in his eyes. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing the scars on his forearms. "Tell me what to do," Luca said. "Hold the light steady," Maya ordered. "Enzo, put pressure on the leg. I have to stop the bleeding in the abdomen first." For the next hour, the room was a blur of controlled chaos. Maya worked with a focus that shut out the world. She clamped vessels. She packed the wound. She stitched with a speed she hadn't known she possessed. Through it all, Luca was her anchor. He didn't flinch at the blood. He didn't question her. He held the light exactly where she needed it. When Leo started to thrash in panic, it was Luca who leaned down, placing a bloody hand on the boy's forehead. "Stay with us." "Leo," Luca said, his voice low and fiercely protective, "you are not dying tonight." "I forbid it. Look at me. Look at Maya. She is fighting for you. You fight for her." The young man focused on Luca's eyes, grounding himself in his boss's strength, and still just enough for Maya to close the wound. When the last bandage was taped in place, and Leo's vitals had stabilized, the adrenaline crash hit the room like a physical weight. Enzo and the other guards wheeled Leo out to a recovery room down the hall. Maya stood over the sink in the corner, scrubbing the blood from her hands. The water turned pink and swirled down the drain. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the soap. She heard the door click shut. Then, a presence behind her. "You saved him." Luca's voice was soft, devoid of the command he used with his men. Maya stared at her hands. The blood was gone, but the feeling of it remained. "I did not feel anything," she whispered, her voice trembling. Luca stepped closer. "What do you mean?" "He was dying," Maya said, turning to face him. A boy, barely older than a teenager, was dying on a table in a penthouse because of a gang war, and I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I just felt mechanical. I am getting used to it. Luca, I am getting used to the blood. I am becoming numb, and that terrifies me more than the bullets. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I am losing myself. Luca made a wounded sound in his throat. He closed the distance between them, ignoring the bloodstains on his own shirt. He pulled her into his arms, wrapping her up tight against his chest. Maya collapsed against him, burying her face in the crook of his neck. She didn't cry, she just shook, letting his warmth seep into her shivering bones. Luca rubbed large, soothing circles on her back, his hand spanning her spine. "You are not numb," he murmured into her hair. "You are strong. There is a difference. You felt his pain. I saw it in your eyes. You just put it aside to save him. That is not losing yourself. Maya, that is being a hero." His words were a balm, but as the shock faded, something else took its place. The proximity, the smell of him, sweat, iron, and that lingering sandalwood, the heat of his body pressing against hers. Maya pulled back slightly, just enough to look at him. The kitchen was dim. lit only by the under-cabinet lights. Luca's face was shadowed, his eyes searching hers. The comfort in his touch began to shift. The hand on her back stopped moving, the fingers splaying out, gripping her waist with a sudden, possessive tension. Maya's breathing slowed, sinking with the heavy thud of his heart against her chest. "Luca?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes, asking a silent question. He lifted one hand, tracing the line of her throat with his thumb, his touch rough yet impossibly gentle. Maya felt a jolt of electricity arc through her. The fear of the war, the exhaustion, the moral confusion, it all funneled into a singular, sharp need. She didn't want to talk about right and wrong anymore. She wanted to feel alive. She stepped in, closing the inch of space between them. Luca let out a breath that sounded like a surrender. He backed her gently until her hips pressed against the granite counter. He didn't trap her. He stood close enough to be felt but left her room to run. But Maya wasn't running. He lowered his head, and this time, the kiss wasn't hesitant. It was a collision. His mouth captured hers with a hunger that spoke of sleepless nights and restrained desire. Maya gasped, opening to him, her hands clutching the fabric of his shirt, pulling him harder against her. His hands roamed over her, learning the curve of her waist, the arch of her spine, tracing her sides over the thin fabric of her scrubs. Every place he touched seemed to burn. He kissed her jaw, the sensitive spot behind her ear, making her knees buckle. "Maya," he groaned against her skin, his voice rough. "Stop me. If you want this to stop, tell me now, because I cannot stop myself." Maya gripped his hair, tugging his head back so he had to look at her. His eyes were blown wide, vulnerable and fierce. "Do not stop," she said, her voice fierce. She pulled him back down to her, kissing him with a desperation that matched his own. It was a reckless choice, a fall from grace, but in that moment, it felt like the only truth that mattered. Luca lifted her effortlessly, sitting her on the edge of the counter so they were eye to level. Her legs wrapped around him, pulling him into the cradle of her hips. The trust between them was palpable. She relaxed into his touch, her defenses shattering completely. Without breaking the kiss, Luca gathered her up, his arms strong and sure beneath her. They stumbled out of the kitchen, down the dark hallway toward the bedroom, leaving the blood and the war and the world behind them. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a private universe where the only law was the touch of skin on skin. The next morning, the sun seemed brighter, the air in the penthouse lighter. Maya woke up tangled in the sheets, her head resting on Luca's chest. For a few glorious minutes, she lay there, listening to his steady breathing, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. Then, a sharp knock on the bedroom door shattered the illusion. "Boss, it is Marco. It is urgent." Luca woke instantly. The tenderness of the night before vanished, replaced by the sharp, alert tension of the predator. He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist, revealing the scars on his back. "Give me a minute," Luca called out, his voice gravelly. He looked down at Maya. His expression softened for a fleeting second, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "Stay here," he whispered. He pulled on a pair of pants and a fresh shirt, transforming back into the dawn before her eyes. He stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door slightly ajar. Maya sat up, pulling the sheet around her, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. She crept toward the door, needing to know what had broken the peace. She heard Marco's voice, low and grim. "We found it. Luca, the leak. It was not a hack. It was human intelligence. Someone inside the inner circle is broadcasting our movements to Rojas." Maya froze. "A mole? Who?" Luca's voice was ice cold. Marco hesitated. "We narrowed it down to 3 men who knew about the dock shipment: Capra, Russo, and Nico." Nico. Maya knew that name. He was Luca's cousin. She had seen pictures of them together as children on the mantel. Silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. "Nico is blood," Luca said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The data does not lie," Marco said. He was the only one with the route details who was not in the convoy. Maya peered through the crack in the door. She saw Luca standing by the window, his back to the room. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The tension radiating off him was terrifying. "Bring them in," Luca said finally. His voice was void of emotion, a dead thing. "Separate rooms. I will handle the questioning myself." "Luca?" Marco started. "I will handle it," Luca roared, spinning around. "If it is Nico. If my own blood has sold us out." He didn't finish the sentence, but the violence in his eyes spoke volumes. "I want the traitor found," Luca said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "And when I find him, I will make sure he never speaks a word to Rojas again. Do it." Maya stepped back from the door, her heart pounding against her ribs. She retreated to the bed, sitting on the edge of the mattress where moments ago she had felt safe. She looked at the pillow where Luca's head had rested. She remembered the gentleness of his hands, the way he had held her like she was precious. But the man in the hallway was planning torture. He was planning execution. She shivered, pulling the sheet tighter. She had fallen for the man who saved her life, the man who held the flashlight while she saved a boy. But could she love the man who decided justice at the end of a gun? Could she lie in bed with a man who might wash his cousin's blood off his hands before he touched her? The peace was gone. The war was back inside the penthouse, and this time, it was in the bed with her. The television screen in the living room flickered with images that looked like a vision of hell. Thick black smoke billowed into the gray sky of Harborview, choking out the sun. Orange flames licked at the skeleton of a collapsed roof, devouring the structure with terrifying speed. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Massive blaze at Moretti Shipping Warehouse, 12 injured, 3 critical." Maya stood before the screen, her arms wrapped tight around her chest, feeling a phantom heat on her skin. She watched as paramedics, people she might have worked with, people she might know, wheeled soot-covered stretchers toward waiting ambulances. A woman was crying on the sidewalk, holding a construction helmet to her chest, her face streaked with ash and tears. Luca stood behind Maya, silent as a statue. He was on the phone, the device pressed hard against his ear, his knuckles white. He was not shouting. His voice was a low, lethal murmur that was somehow more terrifying than a scream. "Find out who was on the security detail," Luca said into the phone, "and tell the families of the injured that all medical expenses are covered. All of them." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the leather sofa. It bounced once and settled, a piece of technology that had just delivered news of devastation. Maya turned to look at him. His face was a mask of granite, but his eyes were burning. "They were just workers. Luca," she whispered. "Forklift drivers, inventory clerks. They are not part of this." "I know," Luca replied, his voice rough. "Rojas does not care, and he's hitting the infrastructure. He wants to turn the city against me. He wants the people to see me not as a provider, but as a liability." He walked to the window, staring out at the city that was slowly turning into a battlefield. "You need to leave," he said suddenly. Without turning around, Maya blinked. "What? I have arranged a flight, a private charter. It leaves in 2 hours for a safe house in Montana. It is a cabin in the mountains. No cell service, no internet. 24-hour guards who are loyal to the death. You will be safe there until this is over." The words hit Maya like a physical slap. Montana. He was sending her away. He was boxing her up and shipping her off like a fragile antique that might break if the house shook too hard. "No," she said. Luca turned slowly. "This is not a request. Maya." "Did you see the news? They burned a warehouse with people inside. The next target could be this building. It could be the car you are riding in. I cannot focus on the war if I am constantly terrified that you are in the line of fire. So you are just going to pack me away?" Maya's voice rose, trembling with a sudden, fierce anger. "You are going to hide me in a cabin while you stay here and bleed? I am doing what is necessary," Luca snapped, his control slipping. "You think I am weak?" she cried. The question hung in the air, sharp and accusing. Maya stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, old wound that he had just inadvertently torn open. "Is that it? You look at me and you see a victim? You see someone who needs to be handled with kid gloves, just like David did?" Luca frowned, confused by the name. "Who is David?" "My ex," Maya said, the words tumbling out in a rush of painful honesty. "He was a master of protection. Luca, at first it was sweet. He checked on me. He drove me everywhere. Then it became control. He told me I was too anxious to drive on the highway. He told me I was too fragile to handle the finances. He chipped away at me, piece by piece, until I believed him. I believed I was nothing without him to hold me up." She took a breath. Her eyes blazing with tears she refused to shed. "It took me 3 years to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet again. 3 years to learn that I am not glass. I am steel, and I will not let you, or anyone else, make me feel small again. I am not leaving. Luca, I am not running away." Luca stared at her, stunned. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of her confession. He looked at her hands, clenched into fists at her sides. He looked at the fire in her eyes. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the woman standing before him was not a damsel he had rescued, but a warrior who had fought battles he knew nothing about. "I do not think you are weak," Luca said, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, stopping inches from her. He reached out, his hands hovering near her shoulders before he let them drop, as if afraid to touch her. "I think you are the only thing I have left that is pure," he admitted. The vulnerability in his voice cracking his armor wide open, and the thought of you getting hurt, it paralyzes me. I do not know how to protect something without locking it away. That is how I was raised. That is this life. I lock the doors. I build the walls. It is the only way I know how to love." Maya felt her anger dissolve, replaced by an aching tenderness. She saw the fear in his eyes, a terror that had nothing to do with guns or rivals, and everything to do with losing her. She stepped into his space deliberately. She raised her hand and placed it flat against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it hammering against her palm, a frantic, heavy rhythm. "Then learn a new way," she whispered. She looked up at him, her gaze steady. "I choose to be here. Luca, I am not a prisoner. I am not a pawn. I am a partner. If you want to protect me, then let me stand beside you. Do not send me away." Luca let out a shuddering breath. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it harder against his chest. "I am sorry," he murmured. "I am so sorry." He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was a collision of fear and relief, a searing confirmation that they were both still alive, still there. Luca's arms went around her, pulling her body flush against his. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a disintegrating world. Maya met his intensity, her hands sliding up his shoulders, gripping the back of his neck. She opened to him, tasting the salt of unshed tears and the sweetness of surrender. The argument had stripped away their defenses, leaving them raw and exposed, and the only way to heal the breach was this, skin against skin, breath mingling with breath. Luca walked her backward until her legs hit the edge of the plush sofa. He didn't break the kiss as they sank down together, his weight pressing her into the cushions. It wasn't about lust, though the heat between them was undeniable. It was about needing to be close, to erase the distance he had tried to put between them. His hands roamed over her clothes, frantic and possessive, tracing the curve of her waist, the line of her hip. Maya clung to him, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. She felt the rough fabric of his shirt under her palms, the heat of his skin radiating through it. "You are here," he whispered against her lips, sounding almost in disbelief. "You are here. I am not going anywhere," she promised. The afternoon light faded into evening shadows as they lay on the couch, limbs tangled. The outside world held at bay for a few precious hours. When they eventually woke, the room was dim and the air was cool. Maya lay with her head on Luca's chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of her heart, a rhythm that was no longer frantic, but calm. Later that evening, the calm was replaced by a grim determination. They sat at the large dining table, which was now covered in blueprints, financial ledgers, and maps of the city. Marco stood at the head of the table, looking surprised to see Maya there, but he said nothing when Luca pulled out a chair for her. "If we keep the distribution centers open, we are inviting another attack," Marco was saying, pointing to a map of the industrial district. "But if we close them, we lose 40% of our legitimate revenue this month." "Close them," Luca said instantly. "I do not care about the money, but the workers," Maya interrupted. She leaned over the map, her brow furrowed. "If you close the centers entirely, the workers go home. If Rojas bombs an empty building, he wins a symbolic victory, but nobody dies. However, if you close the bakeries and the restaurants, you put hundreds of service staff out of work instantly. They live paycheck to paycheck. Luca?" She picked up a pen and circled 3 locations on the map. "Keep the restaurants open, but run them on skeleton crews. Move the inventory from the warehouses at night, using unmarked vans, not the company trucks. Shift the warehouse workers to the restaurants for security detail, gives them a paycheck and adds eyes on the ground." Luca stared at the map, then at Maya. Her logic was sound. It prioritized human life while maintaining a facade of business as usual. "Do it," Luca told Marco. "Shift the logistics. Night transfers only." Marco nodded, scribbling notes. "And the leak? We still do not know how they knew about the warehouse schedule." Maya hesitated. She looked at the timeline Marco had laid out. She looked at the roster of who had been briefed. "It is Nico," she said softly. The room went dead silent. Luca stiffened, his eyes snapping to her. "Do not say that," he warned, his voice low. "Look at the pattern," Maya said, her voice shaking but firm. She pointed to the dates on the ledger, the shipment at the docks, the warehouse inspection schedule, the route for the delivery trucks, the only person who was present for the briefing on the docks, and had access to the digital file for the warehouse, and was seen at the garage before the trucks left. "Is Nico." Marco picked up a tablet, tapping furiously. He cross-referenced the security logs. He checked the phone records. His face turned ashen. "She is right, boss," Marco whispered. Nico's keycard was used to access the warehouse server 2 hours before the fire, and his phone pinged a tower in West Harborview last night. That is Rojas territory. Luca stood up slowly. He walked to the window and stared out at the dark city. His posture was rigid, his shoulders high and tight. Maya could see the devastation radiating off him. Nico wasn't just a cousin. He was like a younger brother. They'd grown up in the same house. Luca had paid for his school. He had protected him. Betrayal by an enemy is expected. Betrayal by family is a knife in the back that never stops twisting. "Bring him in," Luca said to the glass reflection. "No," Maya said, standing up. "Do not bring him here. If you bring him here, you will kill him. I can see it in your face. I should kill him." Luca spun around, his expression contorted with rage and grief. "He got people burned. Maya, he sold us out to a butcher. He is your blood," Maya argued, walking toward him. "There has to be a reason. Nico is weak, yes, but he is not malicious. He worships you. If he turned, something forced him." "I do not care about reasons," Luca roared. "In this world, the penalty for treason is death. If you kill him in blind anger, you are no better than Rojas," Maya said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "You are the man who protects. Remember? Find out the truth first." Luca stared at her, his chest heaving. The monster inside him was clawing to get out, demanding blood for blood, but Maya stood in its path, unwavering. "I will meet him," Luca said finally, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "Neutral ground, the rooftop of the old textile factory. Just me and him, and me," Maya said. "No, I am coming. Luca, I will stay out of sight. I will stay in the stairwell, but I am coming. Because if you pull that trigger without knowing why, you will never forgive yourself, and I will not let you destroy your own soul." The textile factory was a decaying monument to Harborview's industrial past. The rooftop was a flat, gravel-covered expanse, open to the wind coming off the harbor. The night was overcast, the moon hidden behind thick banks of clouds. Maya stood in the shadows of the roof access stairwell, the heavy metal door cracked open just an inch. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She watched as Luca stood in the center of the roof, his coat flapping in the wind. He looked alone, a solitary figure of judgment. The door on the far side of the roof opened. Nico stepped out. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, his eyes darting around nervously. He walked toward Luca, his hands trembling. "Luca," Nico called out, his voice cracking. "You wanted to see me?" Luca turned. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't offer a hand. "Why?" Luca asked simply. Nico froze. He knew instantly that the game was up. He collapsed to his knees on the gravel, sobbing. "They have Mom. Luca." The words were carried away by the wind, but Maya heard them. Luca stood still. "What did you say?" "Rojas." Nico choked out. "He took her 3 weeks ago. He sent me a finger." "A finger, Luca. He said if I did not give him the schedules, if I did not tell him where the trucks were, he would send her back to me in pieces." Luca stared at his cousin. The rage that had been fueling him sputtered and died, replaced by a cold, sick horror. Aunt Maria, the woman who had cooked them Sunday dinners. "You should have come to me," Luca said, his voice breaking. "We would have burned the city down to find her." "I was scared," Nico wailed. "He said he had eyes everywhere. He said if I told you, she was dead." Luca took a step forward, reaching out a hand, not to strike, but to lift him up. "We will get her back. Nico, stand up. We fix this." Crack! The sound was sharp, like a dry branch snapping. Nico's body jerked violently. A spray of red mist erupted from his shoulder. "Sniper!" Luca screamed. He dove forward, but another shot rang out, kicking up gravel inches from his face. "Get down!" Chaos erupted. Bullets began to rain down on the rooftop, sparking against the concrete and metal vents. They were pinned down. The shots were coming from the higher building across the alleyway. Nico was lying on the gravel, screaming, clutching his shoulder. Blood was pouring between his fingers. He was in the open, a sitting duck for the next shot. Luca was pinned behind a ventilation unit, unable to reach him without exposing himself to the kill zone. "Nico, move!" Luca shouted, firing his handgun blindly toward the sniper's position to create cover. "I can't," Nico screamed. Maya didn't think. She didn't weigh the risks. She saw a patient bleeding out, and she saw the man she loved about to die trying to save him. She kicked the stairwell door open. "Maya, no!" Luca's scream tore through the night. Maya sprinted across the rooftop. She stayed low, her body moving with the adrenaline-fueled grace she had learned in the ER. Bullets whizzed past her, angry hornets seeking flesh. She slid across the gravel, skidding to a halt beside Nico. She grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. "Get up!" she yelled in his ear. "I can't move. You move or you die," Maya roared, a ferocity in her voice that shocked even her. She positioned herself between Nico and the sniper's angle, shielding his body with her own. It was a suicidal move, a rejection of every survival instinct. But she offered herself as the barrier. "Luca, cover fire. Now!" she screamed. Luca, paralyzed for a split second by the sight of Maya in the crosshairs, snapped into action. He stood up, abandoning his cover, and fired rapidly at the opposing roof, emptying his magazine. The sniper ducked. "On 3, Maya shouted to Nico. 1, 2, 3. She hauled Nico up, wrapping her arm around his waist, dragging his dead weight. She didn't run away from Luca. She ran toward the heavy brick chimney stack near the edge, the only solid cover large enough for 3. They collapsed behind the brickwork just as the sniper's bullets chewed up the spot where they had been standing. Maya immediately pressed her hands onto Nico's wound, applying pressure. "He hit the subclavian," she announced, her voice eerily calm amidst the gunfire. "I need to hold pressure. Do not let them flank us." Luca slammed a fresh magazine into his gun. He looked at Maya. Her jeans were torn at the knees, her hands were covered in his cousin's blood, and her face was set in a mask of absolute, unshakable focus. She wasn't weak. She wasn't fragile. She was the strongest thing he had ever seen. "Enzo!" Luca yelled into his earpiece. "Rooftop, we are pinned. Take out the shooter across the street." Maya looked up at Luca. Their eyes met over Nico's groaning form. There was no fear in her gaze anymore. There was only the fierce, burning will to survive. "We are getting out of here," she told him. "All of us." Luca nodded, a fierce pride swelling in his chest, warring with the adrenaline. Yes, he said. All of us. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the penthouse guest room, a stark contrast to the chaotic gunfire that had erupted on the rooftop only hours before. Nico Moretti lay pale and still against the white sheets, his shoulder heavily bandaged, a saline drip feeding into his arm. Maya stood over him, checking the flow rate of the IV, her movements automatic but her mind racing. Luca stood by the window, his back to the room. He had not moved in 20 minutes. The tension radiating from him was palpable, a tightly coiled spring ready to snap. He was looking out at the city, but Maya knew he was seeing nothing but the betrayal that had almost gotten them all killed. "He is stable," Maya said softly, breaking the silence. "The bullet missed the artery. He lost blood, but he will live." Luca turned slowly. His face was a mask of exhaustion and cold fury. "He betrayed us. Maya. He fed my routes to Rojas because of him. The warehouse burned because of him. Good men are in the hospital. He was terrified." "Luca," Maya countered, stepping away from the bed to face him. "You heard what he said on the roof. Rojas has your aunt, his mother. What would you have done? If Rojas had taken Marco, or Enzo, if he had taken me, would you have held the line, or would you have burned the world down to save us?" Luca flinched as if she had struck him. He looked at Nico's unconscious form, his expression fracturing. "He should have come to me," Luca whispered, his voice rough with grief. "We could have saved her. Now. God knows if she is even alive. If you punish him now, if you answer his fear with more pain, you're doing exactly what Rojas wants," Maya argued, walking toward him until she was close enough to touch his arm. She felt the muscles bunched hard beneath his shirt. "Rojas wants you to destroy your own family from the inside. He wants you alone. Do not give him that satisfaction." Luca looked down at her, the anger in his eyes warring with a deep, aching sadness. He let out a long, shuddering breath and covered her hand with his own. "I do not know how to stop the bleeding." "Maya," he admitted, "everywhere I turn, there is another wound. Then let me help you stitch it up," she replied firmly. 2 days later, the suffocation of the penthouse became too much to bear. Supplies were running low for the makeshift clinic, and Maya insisted on making the run herself. Luca refused initially, but the compromise was a heavily guarded trip to a medical supply center on the outskirts of the city. However, Maya managed to steal 10 minutes of freedom. She convinced Enzo to let her grab a coffee across the street while he loaded the van, promising to stay in plain sight. The coffee shop was quiet, the smell of roasted beans a welcome change from the scent of antiseptic. Maya ordered a black coffee and stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air. "Miss Torres." The voice was calm, authoritative, and instantly recognizable. Maya froze, the cup warming her hands. She turned to see Detective Rachel Kane leaning against the brick wall of the alleyway, out of sight of Enzo and the van. Kane looked tired, her trench coat rumpled, but her eyes were sharp. "You are a hard woman to find these days," Kane said, stepping closer. "I assume the armed guards across the street are for your protection." Maya straightened her spine. She was done feeling like a victim, and she was done feeling like a criminal. "I am safe." "Detective." "Are you?" Kane asked, her eyebrows raising. "You are living with a man who is currently fighting a war in the streets of Harborview. We found blood on the roof of the textile factory. Maya, we know there was a shootout. We know Nico Moretti is missing. He is recovering," Maya said quickly, then bit her lip, realizing she had said too much. Kane sighed, shaking her head. "Maya, look at me. You are a nurse. You save lives. Luca Moretti ends them. I know you think he is some kind of anti-hero, but he is a criminal. He extorts businesses. He runs illegal gambling. He also protects the people you ignore," Maya shot back, her voice low and fierce. "He pays for the surgeries of his workers. He keeps the heavy drugs out of his neighborhoods. The police come in after the crime happened to draw chalk lines. Luca stops it from happening. That is a romantic way of looking at a mob boss," Kane said dryly. "But here is the reality. Rojas is winning. He's ruthless, and he has more men. Eventually, a bullet is going to find Luca. And if you are standing next to him, it will find you too." Kane reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a deal. Maya. Witness protection, new identity, a job in a hospital in another state. All you have to do is tell us what you know, where the safe houses are, where the money is washed, help us take down the Moretti family, and you get a fresh start." Maya looked at the paper. It was a ticket out. It was a return to normalcy, to a life where she didn't have to check exits or worry about snipers. It was everything she had wanted 3 weeks ago. But then she thought of Luca holding the flashlight while she stitched up a dying boy. She thought of him wrapping his jacket around her in the dark. She thought of the way he had looked at her when she told him he was not a monster. "I cannot sign this," Maya whispered. "Maya, please," Kane pressed, stepping closer. "He's not who you think he is," Maya said, clutching her coffee cup until the cardboard sleeve buckled. "He's trying to end this without more death. He's failing," Kane stated bluntly. "I can only keep the federal agents off his back for so long. Time is running out. Maya, if you do not help us, we cannot help you when the hammer drops." Enzo honked the horn of the van across the street. Maya flinched. "I need time," she said, backing away. "You do not have time," Kane warned, her voice grave. "Make a choice. Maya, before someone makes it for you." Maya turned and ran back to the van, her heart pounding, the folded paper burning a hole in her pocket. Though she had left it in Kane's hand, the choice was made for them that evening. Maya was in the kitchen, organizing the new supplies, when a loud crash came from the study. It sounded like a chair being thrown against a wall. She dropped the box of gauze she was holding and ran down the hall. She found Luca standing in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his face a portrait of pure devastation. On the desk, a laptop was open, playing a video on a loop. Maya walked around the desk to look. Her hands flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. The video was grainy, shot in a dimly lit warehouse. It showed 5 men tied to chairs. They were bruised, beaten, their faces swollen. Maya recognized one of them. It was Mr. Rossi, the elderly man who ran the bakery below the penthouse, a man who had given her a free cannoli just last week. A voice, distorted electronically, narrated the horror. "You want to hold on to your kingdom, Luca? Fine, but a king needs subjects. Surrender your territory by midnight tomorrow, or we start clearing the board. We will not kill your soldiers. We will kill the people who bake your bread, the people who clean your suits, everyone you care about." The screen went black, leaving only the reflection of Luca's horrified face. "He has Mr. Rossi," Maya whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Luca turned away, running a hand through his hair. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured a drink, his hand shaking so badly the glass clinked against the decanter. "He's escalating," Luca said, his voice hollow. "He knows he cannot beat my men in a straight fight, so he is attacking the community. He's making me toxic. If I do not surrender, their blood is on my hands. So we fight," Maya said. "We find them. We?" Luca let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "There is no we in this, Maya. Not anymore. I am done risking you. I am done risking everyone." He downed the drink in one swallow and slammed the glass down. "Marco," he shouted. Marco appeared in the doorway instantly, looking grim. "Prepare the car," Luca ordered. "Call Rojas. Tell him I accept the terms. I will meet him at the location he wants. Alone." "What?" Maya gasped. "No, boss, that is a suicide run," Marco argued, his face paling. "He will kill you the second you walk through the door." "I know," Luca said quietly, "but he will let the hostages go. That is the deal." "And you believe him?" Maya shouted, stepping between Luca and Marco. "You think a man who tortures bakers is going to keep his word? He will kill you. And then he will kill them anyway just to send a message. I have to try," Luca roared, losing his composure. "I cannot watch good people die for me. Maya, I am not that man. So you are just going to throw your life away?" Maya yelled back, poking him hard in the chest. "You are going to leave me? Leave your men? Leave the city to a psychopath like Rojas? That is not sacrifice. Luca, that is quitting." Luca grabbed her wrists, holding her fast. His eyes were wild, desperate. "I'm trying to save you. If I am dead, the war ends. You are safe. I do not want to be safe if it means you are in a box," Maya cried, breaking free of his grip. She took a deep breath, forcing her nurse's calm to descend over her panic. "You need a plan, Luca. A real plan, not a martyrdom complex. I have no leverage," Luca shouted. "He has the hostages. He has the firepower. I have nothing." "You have one thing he does not expect," Maya said, her mind racing, connecting the dots that Luca was too emotional to see. "You have the police." Luca stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "You want me to call the cops? I am the head of the Moretti family. I do not call the cops." "You do if you want to win," Maya insisted. "Look, Rojas expects you to come alone or with your men. He's ready for a gang war. He's not ready for a SWAT team." She grabbed the laptop and turned it toward him. "We give him what he wants. You agree to the meet. You leak the location, but instead of walking in there alone to die, we give the location to Detective Kane. Kane wants to put me in prison," Luca said, shaking his head. "Kane wants Rojas more," Maya countered. "She told me herself. Rojas is chaotic. He's dangerous to the public." "You are organized. You are the lesser evil, Luca. And right now, we need to use that." Luca fell silent, the gears in his mind turning. It went against every code he had been raised with. Omerta. Silence. Never talk to the law, but the rules of the old world were burning down around them. "It is a dangerous play," Marco said softly from the doorway. "If Kane double-crosses us, we all go down." "She will not," Maya said with conviction. "Not if I make the deal." The parking structure was damp and smelled of oil and exhaust. It was midnight, the neutral ground Maya had agreed upon with Kane. She stood alone by a concrete pillar, her silhouette stark against the gray walls. A sedan pulled up, its headlights cutting through the gloom. Detective Kane stepped out. She was alone. "You came," Kane said, sounding surprised. "I told you I needed time," Maya said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "I am using it." Kane crossed her arms. "I assume you are not here to turn yourself in." "I am here to give you Rojas," Maya said. Kane's posture shifted instantly. She went from tired cop to predator. "Talk to me. He has hostages, innocent civilians. He's holding them at the old cannery in the industrial district. He demanded Luca surrender his territory in exchange for their lives." "And what is Luca going to do?" Kane asked. "He's going to show up," Maya said. "He's going to draw Rojas out. He's going to keep him talking. That gives you the window to breach the building and secure the hostages. And then what?" Kane asked skeptically. "We arrest everyone, including your boyfriend?" Maya took a step forward. "Here is the deal. Detective, you get Rojas. You get the kidnappers. You get the credit for saving 5 innocent citizens. In exchange, Luca walks away from the warehouse tonight." Kane laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You want me to let the head of the Moretti family walk away from a crime scene? I want you to let him surrender on his own terms," Maya corrected. "If he survives tonight, he will come in. He will negotiate a plea. No more war, no more bodies in the street. You get the win. Kane, you dismantle the syndicate and you bring in Moretti, but he does not die in that warehouse." Kane stared at Maya for a long, intense minute. She was weighing the politics, the optics, and the morality. "If he pulls a gun on my officers," Kane said, her voice deadly serious, "we will drop him. He will not," Maya promised. "He just wants his people safe." Kane nodded slowly. "The old cannery. 0400 hours. Tell him to keep his head down." Maya returned to the penthouse with a shaking heart. The die was cast. The hours before dawn were the hardest. The penthouse was quiet, the calm before the hurricane. The men were cleaning their weapons, the sharp metallic clicks echoing down the hall. Maya found Luca in the bedroom. He was packing a bag, not for escape, but for battle. He stopped when she entered, the tension in his shoulders dropping just a fraction. "Did she agree?" he asked. "She agreed to try," Maya said. Luca nodded. He walked over to her, his movements slow and deliberate. The frantic energy of the argument was gone, replaced by a solemn gravity. "You saved me tonight," he whispered, cupping her face in his hands, "before the shooting even starts. You saved me. I was ready to die." "Do not talk like that," Maya said, placing her hands on his waist. "You are coming back." Luca pulled her into him, and they sank onto the edge of the bed. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow from the window. They lay down facing each other, fully clothed but more intimate than they had ever been. Luca reached out, his fingers tracing the small, pale scar on her chin, a souvenir from a childhood bike accident. "Tell me about this one," he murmured. "I was 7, Maya whispered. I tried to jump a ramp my brother built. I missed." Luca smiled, a sad, fleeting thing. He took her hand and guided it to his side, to the jagged ridge of an old knife wound. "I was 16, he said. "A fight over a stolen watch. I did not even feel it until I saw the blood." They spent the next hour mapping each other's history written in flesh. Maya traced the bullet graze on his shoulder, the burns on his arm. Luca kissed the faint bruises on her wrist that were fading, but still remembered. It was a silent acknowledgement of the violence they had both endured and the healing they had found in each other. There was no desperation, no frantic grasping, just a quiet, aching closeness. Maya breathed in his scent, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his skin. The fear that this might be the last time was a heavy blanket over them, but it didn't crush them. It just made every second precious. Dawn came too soon. The sky turned a bruised purple, then a bleeding red. Luca stood up, buckling his shoulder holster over a black tactical shirt. He checked the slide of his pistol, the mechanical sound loud in the silence. Maya zipped up a heavy canvas bag. Inside were trauma pads, tourniquets, coagulants, and saline. Luca turned to her. "Maya, I am ready," she said, hoisting the bag onto her shoulder. "No," Luca said, stepping in front of her. "You are staying in the car. You are staying behind the police line. We have been over this," Maya said, her voice steady. "It is too dangerous," Luca pleaded, his eyes searching hers. "If I see you in danger, I will lose focus. I cannot protect you in there." "I do not need you to protect me," Maya said, grabbing the lapels of his tactical vest. "I need you to focus on Rojas. I will focus on the wounded." She looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of the resilience she had built over the years. "You told me once that you lock people away to protect them. That is fear. Luca, real strength is standing together. It is walking into the fire knowing someone has your back. I have yours. Do you have mine?" Luca stared at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, yes, but he also saw an iron will that matched his own. She was right. She was not a liability. She was his equal. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion, "Always," he said. He opened the door, and together, they walked out of the penthouse and into the dawn, ready to face the end of the world. The abandoned warehouse in the industrial district of Harborview looked like the skeleton of a dead leviathan. Rusted iron girders jutted out from the decaying brickwork, and the smell of salt water mixed with the heavy, chemical stench of old oil. It was 4 a.m, the darkest hour before the dawn, and the silence that hung over the docks was heavy and suffocating. Luca Moretti parked the black SUV 300 yards from the main entrance, behind a stack of shipping containers that obscured them from the warehouse's line of sight. He cut the engine. The silence inside the car was louder than the engine had been. "Stay behind me," Luca said, his voice low and devoid of the tremor that Maya knew was vibrating in his hands. "When the shooting starts, and it will start, you get your head down. You do not move until I say so." Maya nodded, clutching the heavy canvas medical bag to her chest. She checked the seal on the trauma kit one last time. "I know the drill. Luca, outside." The shadows seemed to move. Maya knew that Detective Rachel Kane and her tactical unit were out there, creeping through the darkness, setting up a perimeter that would seal Diego Rojas inside his own trap. But looking out at the desolate landscape, Maya felt entirely alone. They exited the car. Luca moved with the lethal grace of a predator, his gun drawn but held low against his leg. Enzo and 3 other men flanked them, moving in a tight formation. They approached the side entrance, a rusted metal door that groaned in the wind. Luca kicked the door open. The interior of the warehouse was a cavernous space of shadows and dust motes dancing in the beams of portable floodlights. In the center of the floor, 5 chairs were arranged in a circle. The hostages, Mr. Rossi the baker, two of Luca's warehouse foremen, and two terrified delivery drivers were tied there, gagged and beaten, but alive. Standing behind them was a wall of armed men, and in front of them stood Diego Rojas. He was wearing a white suit, a jarring contrast to the filth of the warehouse. He smiled when he saw Luca, a wide, shark-like grin that did not reach his dead eyes. "You came," Diego called out, his voice echoing off the metal roof, "and you brought guests." Luca walked forward, stopping 10 yards away. He positioned himself deliberately, keeping his body angled to shield Maya, who stood a few feet behind him. "I am here." "Diego," Luca said, his voice calm and carrying. "Let them go." Diego laughed, stepping over the legs of Mr. Rossi, who whimpered behind his gag. "I expected you to bring an army, Luca. I expected you to burn this place down. Instead, you bring 4 men and—" Diego squinted, peering into the gloom behind Luca. "Is that the nurse? The little bird from the club?" He shook his head, looking at his men with mock disbelief. "He brought a nurse to a war. You really have gone soft, Moretti. That is why this city needs a real king. You are weak. You let your heart bleed for the help." "I am here," Luca repeated, his voice hardening. "That was the deal. Me for them, cut them loose, and we settle this." Diego pulled a silver pistol from his waistband. He walked slowly toward Luca, savoring the moment. "The deal has changed," Diego said. "I think I will keep them, and I will kill you. And then, I think I will introduce the nurse to my men." Maya felt a spike of cold terror, but she forced herself to breathe. She scanned the rafters. She scanned the broken windows high above. She was looking for the sign Cain had promised. "Do not touch her," Luca growled, raising his weapon. Tension stretched the air until it hummed. Every man in the room had a finger on a trigger. Sweat dripped down Maya's back. Then she saw it, a tiny momentary flash of light from the upper catwalks, a reflection on a sniper scope. Diego saw it too. "Sniper," one of his men screamed. The world exploded into noise. Diego dove behind a crate just as a bullet sparked against the concrete where he had been standing. His men opened fire blindly, spraying the entrance with lead. "Take cover," Luca roared. He tackled Maya, shoving her behind a heavy steel pillar just as wood splinters rained down on them from the crate beside them. The air filled with the deafening roar of automatic gunfire, the shouts of men, and the screams of the hostages. "Police! Drop your weapons!" a voice boomed over a megaphone outside, but it was lost in the chaos. The tactical team breached the skylights, rappelling down on ropes, their weapons flashing. The warehouse turned into a slaughterhouse of noise and confusion. "Maya, stay here," Luca shouted, popping out from behind the pillar to fire 2 controlled shots. But Maya saw movement to her left. One of the hostages, Mr. Rossi, had managed to tip his chair over and was crawling desperately across the floor, blood trailing from a wound in his leg. He was right in the crossfire. Maya did not think. She grabbed her bag and sprinted from cover. "Maya!" Luca screamed, his voice filled with raw terror. She dove across the concrete, sliding into the space behind a forklift where Mr. Rossi was huddled. Bullets chewed up the floor inches from her boots. She grabbed Mr. Rossi's collar and dragged him deeper into the cover of the machine. "It is okay, Mr. Rossi, it is okay," she chanted, her hands flying to the wound on his thigh. It was a through and through. She ripped open a packet of clotting gauze and pressed it hard into the hole. "Hold this. Hold it tight." She looked up. The battle was raging. Luca was moving through the gunfire like a wraith, advancing on Diego's position, taking down men with terrifying precision. He was drawing their fire, making himself the target to keep the heat off Maya and the hostages. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her. Maya looked up to see one of Diego's enforcers standing over her, a shotgun raised. He had flanked them. He grinned, his teeth stained with blood. "Say goodnight, Noor." 2 shots rang out. The man jerked backward as if kicked by a mule, collapsing to the floor. Maya spun around. Luca was standing 20 feet away, his gun smoking. He had saved her. But in doing so, he had stepped out of cover. Diego Rojas rose from behind a row of oil drums. He didn't hesitate. He raised his pistol and fired. Crack, The impact was visible. Luca's body twisted violently. A spray of red mist erupted from his side, just above the hip. He stumbled, his legs buckling, but he did not fall. "Luca!" Maya screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. "Get down!" Luca bellowed back, his voice strained with agony. He didn't retreat. He didn't look at his wound. He staggered toward her, placing himself between the remaining shooters and her position. He fired again and again, his gun spitting fire, forcing Diego's men to keep their heads down. Maya scrambled to him. She didn't care about the bullets. She reached him just as his knees hit the concrete. She fell beside him, her hands instantly finding the source of the blood that was soaking his tactical shirt. "Pressure," she yelled, pressing her palms against the hot, wet wound. Luca groaned, a guttural sound of pain, but he didn't stop firing. He rested his gun arm on his knee to steady it, continuing to shoot over her shoulder. The barrel of his gun pressed against her cheek. It was searing hot, burning her skin, but she didn't flinch. The heat was proof he was still fighting. The casing from his ejected rounds bounced off her shoulder. "We have to move," Maya shouted in his ear. "You are losing too much blood. I am not finished." Luca gasped, reloading with a trembling hand. Suddenly, the firing stopped near them. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the distant shouting of the SWAT team clearing the far side of the warehouse. Diego emerged from the dust and smoke. He was less than 10 feet away. He looked battered, his white suit ruined, but his gun was leveled at Luca's head. "So much for the king!" Diego spat, walking closer. Luca tried to raise his weapon, but his strength failed him. His arm shook uncontrollably, and the gun clattered to the floor. He slumped against Maya, his breathing ragged. Diego smiled. He shifted his aim from Luca to Maya. "Get up!" "Nurse." "No," Luca rasped, trying to shield her with his body. "Take me. Leave her." Diego lunged forward. He grabbed Maya by her hair, yanking her violently away from Luca. She screamed, clawing at his hand, but he was too strong. He hauled her to her feet, spinning her around and jamming the barrel of his gun into her ribs. He dragged her backward toward a side exit, using her body as a human shield against the police who were now advancing. "Back off," Diego screamed at the officers. "Back off or I blow her heart out." The police froze. Dozens of red laser dots danced on Diego and Maya, but no one could take the shot without risking hitting her. Luca was on the ground, bleeding out. He watched Diego dragging Maya away. A primal roar built in his chest. He fumbled for his dropped gun, his fingers slipping on his own blood. He gripped the handle, forcing his body to obey through a haze of pain. He raised the gun. His hand was wavering. He couldn't get a clean shot. Maya was covering Diego's vital zones. "Put the gun down, Moretti!" Diego shouted, laughing maniacally. "Or watch her die." Maya felt the cold steel against her ribs. She saw Luca, broken and bleeding on the floor, trying to aim. His eyes filled with a terrifying helplessness. He wouldn't shoot. He couldn't risk hitting her. She remembered his words. "I do not know how to protect something without locking it away." She remembered her own. Real strength is standing together. She looked at Luca. She locked eyes with him across the dusty, blood-stained floor. She saw the despair in his gaze. She grit her teeth. She was not a damsel. She was not a victim. "You think I am weak?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. Diego paused, confused. "What? Let me move." Maya didn't struggle away. She didn't try to run. Instead, she went dead weight. She exhaled all the air in her lungs and dropped straight down, her knees hitting the concrete, twisting her body violently to the left. It was a move Diego didn't expect. For a split second, his human shield was gone. For a split second, his chest was exposed. That was all Luca needed. The wavering in his hand stopped. His focus narrowed to a pinpoint. Bang, bang. 2 shots, center mass. The recoil jolted through Luca's injured body, sending a fresh wave of agony through him, but he didn't drop the weapon. Diego looked down at his chest, stunned. He crumpled backward, his gun clattering uselessly to the floor. He didn't move again. Maya scrambled away from the body, gasping for air. She looked at Luca. He was already moving, dragging himself across the floor, leaving a streak of blood behind him. He reached her, collapsing to his knees, and pulled her into him with a desperate, crushing strength. He buried his face in her neck, his breath coming in ragged sobs. His gun was still in his hand, pressed against her back. She could feel the heat of the metal through her shirt. It was warm. It was burning. It was the most comforting thing she had ever felt. "I got you," he choked out. "I got you." Maya clung to his shirt, her hands sticky with his blood. They shook together, two survivors amidst the wreckage. "We did it," she whispered into his ear. "Luca, we did it." Light flooded the area. Police, hands where we can see them. Officers in tactical gear swarmed them. Maya didn't let go of Luca. She raised one hand, showing her empty palm, while the other kept pressure on his wound. "Medic," she screamed. "I need a medic here." Detective Kane stepped through the circle of officers. She lowered her weapon when she saw Diego's body. She looked at the hostages, who were being led to safety. She looked at Luca and Maya, tangled together on the floor, bloodied and broken, but alive. An officer moved to handcuff Luca. "Wait," Kane ordered. She walked over and crouched down beside them. She looked at Luca's wound. "That is a nasty hit." "Moretti," she said, her voice devoid of its usual antagonism. "He saved the hostages," Maya said fiercely, staring Kane down. "He took the bullet from me. He shot Diego. He kept his word." Kane looked at Diego's body, then back at Luca. "He did," Kane admitted quietly. She stood up and signaled the paramedics. "Get him to the hospital. Under guard." She looked at Maya. "Your statement is going to be very important, Maya. It might be the difference between a life sentence and a chance at a future. You saved a lot of lives tonight. Both of you." Luca looked up at Kane, his face pale as ash, his grip on Maya weakening as consciousness began to fade. "I surrender," he whispered. Weeks later, the snow began to fall in Harborview, covering the grime of the city in a blanket of pristine white. The dismantling of the Rojas Syndicate had been swift and brutal. Without Diego, the organization crumbled. The police, armed with the intelligence found in the warehouse, swept through the city, arresting lieutenants and seizing assets. Nico Moretti testified via video link from his hospital bed. He looked thin and haunted, his arm in a sling, but his voice was steady as he named names, implicating the Rojas leadership in kidnapping and extortion. His testimony was the final nail in the coffin for the syndicate, and a plea deal that would keep him out of prison, though he would never be part of the family business again. The Moretti family was not spared, but it was changed. Luca faced a tribunal of judges. The charges were severe: illegal possession of firearms, racketeering, assault, but the defense, bolstered by Kane's report and the testimony of the hostages he had saved, argued for leniency. The plea bargain was historic. Luca Moretti would serve no prison time, but the cost was his empire. His assets were frozen or seized. His territory was dissolved. He was placed under house arrest for 5 years, with an ankle monitor and strict surveillance. He was barred from associating with known felons. The Moretti crime family, as an entity of power, was dead. But Luca was alive. Maya returned to Harborview General. The whispers followed her for weeks. The nurse who had been the girlfriend of a mob boss. The woman who had been in the warehouse shootout. But Maya walked with her head high. She was not the fragile girl who had been afraid of her ex-boyfriend anymore. She was the woman who had looked down the barrel of a gun and screamed. She attended trauma therapy twice a week, sitting in a circle of chairs, talking about the nightmares and the sound of gunshots. She learned that strength wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing what needed to be done while the fear was screaming at you to stop. Luca visited the hospital every Tuesday. He was allowed out for community service and medical appointments. He would sit in the lobby, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, reading a book while he waited for her shift to end. He looked different without the suits, without the guards. He looked like a man. One evening in late winter, they stood on the rooftop of Maya's apartment building. It was not a penthouse. It was a modest walk-up with a view of the water towers and the distant lights of the bridge. The wind was cold, biting at their cheeks. Luca leaned against the railing, the bulky black monitor on his ankle visible above his boot. He was smoking a cigarette, a habit he was trying to quit. Maya stood beside him, wrapping her coat tighter. "You know," she said, looking out at the city. My supervisor asked me today if I was scared to be seen with you. She said you look dangerous. Luca chuckled. A low, rasping sound. I am a convicted felon on house arrest who cannot leave a 5-mile radius. I am about as dangerous as a golden retriever. Maya smiled, bumping her shoulder against his. You are still dangerous, Luca. Just in a different way. Luca turned to look at her. The scar on his side from the bullet wound was still healing, a jagged reminder of the night he almost died. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His fingers were cold, but his touch was warm. I remember what you yelled, he said softly. In the warehouse. Maya looked down. I yelled a lot of things. You yelled, "You think I'm weak?" Maya laughed breathlessly. I was angry. He was using me as a shield. Luca stepped closer, closing the gap between them. I never thought you were weak, Maya. I was just terrified that the world was too heavy for someone so good. He ran his thumb over her lip. But I was wrong. You were the one who carried us out of there. You were always the strongest person in the room. Maya placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. We carried each other, she corrected him. Luca lowered his head. He kissed her. Not with the frantic desperation of a man about to die, and not with the hungry passion of a man trying to forget. He kissed her slowly, deliberately. It was a kiss of promise. It tasted of winter air and tobacco and a future that was uncertain, difficult, and absolutely worth fighting for. Harborview's sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder that the city was still broken, still bleeding. But as they stood together on the roof, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew they didn't have to fix the whole world. They just had to face it together. Thank you so much for reading this story. It has been an incredible journey bringing Maya and Luca to life, from the chaos of the nightclub to the quiet strength of the final rooftop scene. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Maya's transformation resonate with you? Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening or reading from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more gritty, emotional, and passionate tales. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong.